Well, last month I attended the annual gathering of the US Family Policy Councils from almost every state in the US, groups who are similar to Family First, and who promote family, life, and religious freedom. It was called SoConCon, Social Conservatives Conference, and it was in Indianapolis, similar to our Forum on the Family coming up in 2 weeks. And as part of the proceedings, we prayed for Jason McGuire, who's the executive director of New York Families Foundation, which is the Family Policy Council in New York. New York's been in the news quite a bit, hasn't it, over the last couple of years, especially an Attorney General, Letitia James, who has been accused of engaging in lawfare against President Trump for political purposes. But Jason has just completed his second of 8 weekends in jail. And by the time you watch this McBlog, he will likely be serving his third weekend behind bars. His crime? Well, leading a Christian pro-life ministry, similar to Family First, that dared to oppose the radical abortion agenda pushed by New York state leadership. And in April 2025, to avoid a crushingly expensive, drawn-out legal battle, very costly, like our deregistration case here in New Zealand by the Charities Board, Jason pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of filing false campaign finance disclosures. They basically involved small bookkeeping errors, emissions totaling about $1,200, and a few missing receipts. Now, Jason wrote, Letitia James weaponised her office to target me because I dared to speak against her radical pro-abortion policies. For more than 3 years, her office harassed my family, my staff, the ministry, demanding donor lists, monitoring bank accounts, and threatening my wife, he said. In the end, they manufactured a case over 3 minor omissions totaling $1,283.76 on a campaign finance report unrelated to New York families. Rather than drain $250,000 fighting an overzealous prosecution, I accepted a misdemeanor plea. But make no mistake, this is not justice, it's political retribution. Now, last month, he was sentenced to serve 8 weekends in Livingston County Jail. Let's talk to Jason McGuire. Well, joining me is Jason McGuire. Jason, it's great to catch up with you. The last time I saw you was in Indianapolis, as I just told our audience, and we were praying for you because you were about to go into prison for your first weekend of 8 weekends. Look, before we get into that, maybe just for the benefit of the audience, just tell us what the New York Families Foundation does.
Yeah. Well, we're not unlike your organization there in New Zealand. We really believe in promoting strong families, preserving religious liberty, protecting human life, and proclaiming the biblical concepts of justice and mercy. So we do a lot of the same issues that you're doing in New Zealand. I just think of you as one of our international counterparts doing the good work there that we're seeking to do here in the Empire State, New York.
Yeah, I know Canada wants to be the 51st state, but New Zealand's already taken that status as virtue of me coming to the conferences for 20 years. Okay, so look, you're obviously speaking up into the culture. You're challenging politicians as we are doing. You're looking at the intersection of faith and culture and politics. But you got yourself into trouble. What sort of got you on the radar? And can I just remind our audience, but also for your benefit, a couple of years ago, the state came after us when we spoke up against the changes to the definition of marriage. And eventually, after 4 court cases and $750,000, we were deregistered as a charity because they don't like our view of marriage and family. So I can sort of relate to putting your head above the parapet and being shot at by the state. What led to you suddenly becoming public enemy number one?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a lot of it is, we use the term here a lot of times lawfare. It's the weaponization of the Justice Department, or in this case, the Attorney General's office. You're seeing how people are using the legal system and really litigation and just dragging things out in court as a means of trying to drain resources from those you politically oppose. Or in the case of our New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, she has been the chief nemesis of President Donald Trump here in America and here in New York. She's now trained her eyes in our organization. 8 years ago, I had a political rival who really filed a complaint with the AG's office against me. The Office of Public Integrity saw it for what it was. They knew there was nothing to it, but that letter was all that the Attorney General needed to then be able to take and open a full blown investigation of myself personally, but also professionally. All of my organizations, the New York Families Foundation, New York Families Action, the two organizations I direct, but also private Christian schools where I served as the chairman of the board, came under scrutiny as a part of this investigation. The Attorney General's office was seeking information from us. They wanted copies of sermons I preached, lists of attendees at my events, which would have included our donors, and then would have made them also targets of the Attorney General's office. We refused to submit a lot of that information, and they just kept coming after us for really 3.5 years, about 8 different subpoenas, several thousand pages of documentation. They were on a fishing expedition trying to find anything they could. Last December, I'd had enough, and I just told my attorneys, I said, look, go back to the Attorney General's office, tell them we have been working with them through this, but unless they're going to bring charges, we're walking away. And if they're going to
Yep.
bring charges, we're ready to go to trial. That then forced them about a month later to come back and to say, all right, well, would you take 2 misdemeanors? Well, in talking to my board and talking to my lawyers, they said the cost of defending in 2 trials would be $250,000. If we
Yeah.
took the 2 misdemeanors, we said there really probably wouldn't be any real repercussions for that. And so we agreed to plead to 2 misdemeanors over election law violations. There were 3 missing transactions from some reports that we had, very minor thing here in New York. That's what we pled to. But then the Attorney General's office, Letitia James, put out a hit piece on me accusing me of stealing funds. It was not true. It was not what I pled to. And that sentencing, I received 8 weekends of incarceration. I'm about halfway through that sentence now. And, really, we consider ourselves political prisoners here now at my organization over what has been happening here in the Empire State.
Yeah, that's a bit that I found really galling. The most egregious part was you admitted, okay, there was some missing receipts, and $1,200 amongst a multi-million dollar organization over a number of years is, I mean, yeah, it's a joke. But what I found the worst aspect of the case for you, Jason, was that the Attorney General put out a media statement as to what you'd been found guilty of, and it was completely false, and it painted you in a terrible way. One of the ones we laughed at when I was with you was that you'd spent money on beauty products. Now, just looking at the two of us, obviously we're not big consumers of beauty products, but how can they do this with a straight face? And where was the media accountability to say, Letitia, you're telling porkies, tell the truth?
Yeah, and that was troubling because that press release put out by the Attorney General's office dropped at the exact second I was signing the plea agreement in the court. It was pre-planned. I believe it was a pre-planned
Wow.
hit piece on me. And that went out statewide. I'm literally in the court. I had not yet turned on my phone as I was still in the courtroom, and reporters were already reaching out for comment. That's how quickly it moved. And so stories were already being published before I had the opportunity to respond. We did go back and talk to some of the reporters trying to correct the record, and they said, look, if that's the Attorney General's office is saying, that we have to accept that, no matter what we said to the contrary. We had our attorneys draft a letter demanding a retraction from the Attorney General's office. And the Attorney General's office simply said, no, we're going to stand by it. We're not going to do it.
Mm.
Oh, well. And so that's where it left. And I think that ultimately, when they decided they could not find anything and win in the courts, they decided to go after the politics of personal destruction and just try to besmirch and demean my name in press across the state.
And there's been no correction to the false information put out even since.
No, not at all. It's that's the last piece we had out of that Attorney General's office were all the lies.
So if people Google your name, they'll find that you pleaded guilty to buying beauty products, apparently.
Yeah, and not just for now, but for all time. I mean, what's on the internet lives forever. And so
Yeah.
when a person in a high elected office, and in this case, it's a statewide office, it's the Attorney
Mm,
General of the state of New York,
mm,
that is generally deemed as credible. At least I used to
mm.
think so.
Yeah.
If those statements go out every time my name is Googled, you
Mm.
will have, just doubt about me, that asterisk after my name for the rest of my life because of an
Yeah.
action that the Attorney General's office took.
Okay. I noticed there has been some pushback. This is just from today, I think. The Washington Times, which is not exactly. Oh, actually, that would be a slightly more right leaning, more balanced newspaper. I was thinking of the Washington Post, of course. They're not.
Well, there's been the Washington Examiner and the Washington Times, one a little more conservative than the other. But
Mm,
I'm very thankful for those that have been pushing back and that have now
mm,
picked up the story and said, wait a second, what's happening in New York isn't right. I
yeah.
think that the Attorney General expected that we would just kind of tuck our tail between our legs and go away. Because
Mm,
for 3.5 years, we had been quiet, really working through the legal
yeah.
process. But now it's time for us to declare what's going on and to really try to, right a wrong and seek
Mm.
justice in this injustice.
Yeah, and I thought one of the concerning aspects was that they were willing to go after your donors. They wanted names of donors. And I think, that's sort of really taking it to a gutter level where you start going after the funders of an organization. And there's always that privacy aspect of that. So that showed just how desperate they were.
Yeah. Your viewers may remember there was a presidential candidate, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley had a PAC, Political Action Committee here in New York. And so
Mm.
she had to submit paperwork to the Attorney General's office, including a list of donors on that required paperwork. Well, lo and behold, a list was leaked, and
Mm.
those donors' names made it to the media. They were published reports. And
Wow.
on that report was a stamp from the Attorney General's office. So we know the leak came out of there. So another reason why we did not want to release our donors to this Attorney General is she or someone in her office were leaking those lists of political opponents.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, you turned up to court. You're expecting just to get a, what, slap on the wrist, maybe a fine. And you're told, uh, buddy, you're going to prison. That must have been a real shock.
Excuse me. Yeah, it was a surprise. We really there was no probation was being we didn't think we'd even get probation. There was no
Mm.
demand for restitution. When the pre-sentencing report was looking for victims of the crime, people they were calling weren't even responding to the calls. They said, I haven't been harmed in any way, why would I respond to this? And so there was no call for restitution. There was no demand for incarceration really given there. What happened was at the court, the judge said, look, I see no reason to give you probation, but what message do I send if I don't allow some form of
Mm.
incarceration for misdemeanors? And I think there it was probably a judge trying not to um, take a position that he was giving favors to those maybe who are politically connected. But I
Mm.
don't really fault the judge in this case. I'll tell you what I'm looking at as an attorney general. It was her
Mm.
lawfare that led to this.
Yeah.
And I am really, as a result of Letitia James' lawfare, I am incarcerated now 8 weekends in the state of New York.
I mean, you must take it as a bit of a badge of honor that, for promoting life and family and marriage and religious freedom, that they've come after you. You're obviously making an impact that they feel so threatened by you. I mean, that's a bit of a badge of honor in my view.
Yeah, we're trying to wear it that way. It's at times it's been difficult. I'm not going to
Yeah.
lie. My attorneys gave me some great advice at the very beginning of this process. They said, Jason, you're going to think at times that your whole life is a lawsuit. Your life is more than a lawsuit. And that was
Yeah.
really good counsel because
Yeah.
it's helped me to remember that this is just one part of my life that's going on. There's other things I need to
Mm.
focus on. So we've continued to do the work that we're engaged in. But
Mm.
as a result of the work we're engaged in, we are frequently opponents of New York State Attorney General Letitia James.
Yeah.
We have been heading towards court against her on multiple occasions. We have called her out for actions she has taken, particularly on some of the abortion issues and
Mm.
transgender issues here in the state.
Mm.
And so we are a frequent critic and an outspoken opponent of the Attorney General in many of the stances she takes. And I
Yeah.
just think we're living in a day and an age where those in power are looking to weaponize their office to crush those beneath them. Thankfully, we are a faith-based organization, and we're
Mm.
grateful that God is seeing us through this, and we're grateful for our friends and supporters who've been
Mm.
standing with us and praying for us as well.
Let's just talk about the jail aspect because I have read some of your commentary and look at the conference. I think we were all in sort of shock and just wanted to support you in whatever way. This is the image of the leaders praying for you on stage at the SoConCon in Indianapolis. And I don't know if you remember, but the day before you were to start your stint in jail, as we were having a bit of a laugh, I mentioned that I wanted to call you Joseph because you reminded me of Joseph in the Bible, where he was in prison, wrongly accused. He was deserted by his brothers, but at the same time, the scripture says that what people intended for evil, God used for good. Um, do you think you've come to that realization?
Yeah, I think we're watching it unfold. Sometimes when Joseph was in the jail cell, he didn't always appreciate, I think, in that moment where this would
Mhm.
ultimately lead. I think we're
Yeah,
still in a bit of that phase, but we're starting to see some good things happening. The picture that you have on the screen there really occurred 24 hours before my first ever
yeah,
incarceration.
yeah.
And I remember, again, just a day after this picture was taken, I'm locked in the transport vehicle with, three other
Mm,
guys and one woman on the other side of the van. And they clock that door, they lock that door behind you. You hear the clink and you go through the process of, the strip search, and you can't bring a single
mm,
thing in with you to the jail. And, every door that locks behind you as you go, it's a foreboding sound. And so I remember going to my cell, and there wasn't even a mattress in the metal shelf that was in there. There wasn't a roll of toilet paper in the facilities in the cell. It was a very meager situation. And yet, out of that, I really had this tremendous desire to have a copy of God's word. And, it's something I frequently have with me, I take for granted. And yet, on that particular stay, it was the next day that a prison guard was able to find me a copy of the scriptures. And I'll tell you, there was nothing I wanted more than that. And,
mm.
and really, just in that moment, I could see that Jesus was with me, even in the jail cell. And I think that's been an important part of the growth. And just for me personally, is to realize that there's a whole lot of things that I have taken for granted. But God is with us in our suffering just as much as he is with us in our rejoicing.
But it also give you some understanding of maybe how we run prisons, the way we treat prisoners, and whether we're really just focused on the punishment and not on the rehabilitation.
Yeah, I'm what's called a weekender because I just go in, 6
Mm,
o'clock on Friday nights, and I'm out on Monday mornings at 6 a.m. So as weekenders, I don't have visitation rights. I don't have
no,
classes. We can't even have any kind of playing cards or anything. There's one
mm,
TV when I'm not on lockdown. You can watch the TV in kind of a common quarters in our little pod. But what I mean is that no one there is offered any kind of classes. Now I have a steady job. We have a good family. My kids are all grown now, but I'm in there with other men, some of them who are very young. And they come from a life of addiction, and I don't know what help they're getting on the weekends. All they do is literally sit there and
mm,
watch TV. I don't know if they're getting
mm,
parenting classes and what it means to be a dad.
mm,
They're certainly not getting job placement skills or help with those things. And so I just have to wonder, one of the things that's hit me as I'm in jail is the idleness of the time that's there. I mean, you get in there
mm,
Friday night, we don't leave till Monday, and some of the guys come in and they just literally sleep the day and the night away. It's
mm,
nothing but sleep because
mm,
they're just being idle. And
mm.
idle isn't going to help them when they get on the outside. And so I think that our system of justice has to look at what we're doing, that while we do want to protect people from others who might harm them, so there's a place for, incarcerating violent people,
Mm.
maybe some of the things we're incarcerating people for, we're not helping them by just locking them up for a while and not helping them to have a better path when they leave.
Yeah. Did you sort of get the impression that there's kind of not like a human respect? I mean, the fact that you didn't even have a mattress, and I think I saw in one of your commentaries that even the ability to shower and toilet was
Right.
restricted. I mean, it's almost inhumane.
Yeah, I was on lockdown for 60 hours my first weekend there. You literally got
60.
out, the cell was opened up to go out and take a tray that was brought to the main door, I don't know, 30 feet away from my cell. And then you would
Yeah.
walk back to the cell and eat your meal in your cell. That was the only time I really came out during that time. And I will have to say, I did not have a problem with any of the jail guards, for any of the
Mm,
folks that were watching over me. They were all very professional. Some
mm,
maybe have a little better bedside manner than others, but no real complaints there. It's more about probably um, the under financing, that they did not have enough mattresses in the jail for the number of people that are being incarcerated. It's how little activities are provided. Again, not to keep people amused. It's jail. I get it. It's more about what's not provided to help people get better. If you
mm,
have an addiction, don't just
mm,
sleep it off over the weekend. Let's work on that.
mm,
If you're a dad and you're trying to raise kids, and you've got these other issues going on in your life that land you in jail, then how about some parenting classes? How about some mentoring
mm,
classes, helping young men learn how to become, strong men that don't have to find themselves returning to this place? There's a lot of
yeah.
work to do. One of the young men I'm serving with has been looking for a job, and he's really been struggling because he's got a record. Well, that would be a perfect place to help him learn how to build a resume and to make contacts, to find people who are willing to hire people who have a record. There are many things we can do in our criminal justice system. And I'm hopeful that, my time in this incarceration will lead to some good things where we can start thinking about our agenda and how we can help advance some things in our culture.
I mean, I asked this slightly facetiously, but is everybody else who's checking in for the 60 hours this coming weekend, are they all because they didn't file receipts?
It's funny you should say it that way, because in 2022, there were 4,000 election law violations in New York State. Not a single one was prosecuted. We
Wow.
have a situation right now where there's 400,000 missing dollars from one of the Bronx Democratic Party here in the state of New York. That story broke a year and a half ago, and we've heard no action on that. And so you have to ask yourself, why this one? We contend it's because of the values that we have held, because we have raised our voice against the Attorney General and the values that she espouses. I believe
Mm.
we have been targeted by the Attorney General's office here in New York.
So as you head into and when people are watching this, you'll probably be there, your third weekend in incarceration. What type of emotion do you have now that you've served 2 weekends?
Yeah, so we'll be actually heading into my fourth weekend here, so we'll be about
Fourth.
halfway
Mm.
through. Thankful for that. Um, you know, Again, it goes back to the idleness, but one of the frustrations I have is I'm a doer and I like to be
Mm.
project oriented and getting a lot done. And to just sit in the cell and literally not have anything to do. I'll have a copy of the
Mm.
Bible with me. Maybe I can find a paper and a pen if someone will be able to grant me that,
Mm.
so I can scribble some notes down, but that's it. And so I spend a lot of time praying. I spend a lot of time trying to think in my head and recollect some things I want to write when I get out, when I'm back on my laptop. And I spend time trying to build relationships with other guys around me. I'm no longer on lockdown now. So last weekend was my first weekend where I was able to get out of my cell during the day, and then I could mix with some of the other guys in my pod more
Mm.
regularly. And so,
Yeah.
I've just been doing what Christians do. We build
Mm.
relationships with people. We just get to know them. We've been spending some time in Bible study with some of the guys in my pod. Last week, I was able to attend religious services for the first time. That's a
Wow.
rare thing for weekenders. I was told that they have not attended religious services before, but we pushed for it, and we
Mm.
were able to attend religious services. I tell people it's the first time I came after church. I had to receive a strip search, but after going out for that religious service, a little Bible study, of course, strip down, get searched again. And so you never walk away from some of the privacy issues, the dignity issues,
Mm.
even when you're at a Bible study, when you're behind
Yeah.
bars.
Wow. Jason, just finally, you've paid a high price for speaking out. I mean, um, many of us in this type of field, we're target. People would love to silence our voices. What's your word of encouragement for those who are speaking up, who want to speak into the culture, who want to speak biblical truth, and yet we see all this kind of lawfare? I mean, I was reading a case this morning where a woman who simply prayed silently in the UK near an abortion facility was arrested. Billboard Chris in Australia was getting in trouble and had to fight through the courts. There is an attempt to silence us. What's your word of encouragement in this area, having faced the actual real consequence of speaking up and being true to your values?
Yeah. When I was growing up as a teenager, one of my favorite verses was Luke 9:23, where it talks about taking up your cross daily and following Christ. And I didn't really understood all that that would entail. I'm sure I don't even understand all of it today, but it was this idea that as followers of Christ, we are called to something, and it will not always be easy. I have to take up my cross daily. And if a part of my suffering and identifying with Christ is what we're going through, then so be it. I rest in the Lord. I also realize that one of the reasons I need to speak out now is because courage begets courage. And this is a time, this is a moment when culturally, even internationally, as you're testifying there in New Zealand too,
Mm.
is we have to speak out on these issues. And if we will not stand up, if we will not speak out on these issues, then who will? It's
Mm.
so important that we're doing that. And so there are some very basic truths, even regarding biology and regarding our individual rights, our human rights,
Mm.
that we need to be declaring and saying what many governments are doing is wrong. And speaking to the culture, and saying, you know what, life does begin at the moment of conception. It doesn't end until natural death. There are some basic biological truths, like there is such a thing as male and female, and that's defined. We have to speak up for religious liberty because there are those who would seek to take it away from us. And if we don't speak up on these issues, well, no one else will. And so I just challenge you, and I'll tell you this, God is faithful, because even in the midst of the trial, I'm claustrophobic. I walked into a cell afraid of what was going to happen and what would be going through my head and what kind of place I'd be in. But God's been answering the prayers of his people. I'm in a 9x9 cell, and I have not experienced 1 ounce of claustrophobia. I am so grateful how God is seeing us through this.
Yeah, fantastic. Jason, thank you for your work. Thank you for your voice. We do just pray for you, for your wife and family. And it's a reminder that there is a cost, as you say. But as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, I like to quote, even if we won't bow down to the culture. So thank you. We will be thinking of you over the next couple of weekends, but what people intended for evil, God will use for good. So blessings to you. Thanks for your time, Jason.
Oh, thanks, Bob. It's good to be with you, and I always appreciate your friendship and partnership, fellowship in this fight.